What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here with another game from the Supershowdown Poznan tournament that was played in Poland earlier for Star Wars Unlimited TCG. This time it is a match from the top 8 with Sarna on the left playing Chewbacca green using the 30 HP Echo base, while Klakier on the right is playing a Energy Conversion Lab Sabine deck. So both using green bases, but Sarna on the 30 HP and Klakier on the 25 HP with that nice epic action for the ambush. So this should be interesting. Will Chewie's Sentinels be able to hold back Sabine's aggression? Well, let's find out. And as always, shout out to Sklad Gear, which I believe is the store that hosted this event and which put this footage up on their YouTube channel. Because it was video only with no audio, I'm doing my own audio commentary on these matches, and I have several of them from earlier in the tournament in the channel archives if you want to check those out. But without further ado, let's get to the game. So, Klakier versus Sarna, and we are watching this on 1.25x speed up if you're wondering why these players can shuffle so fast and so on. Okay. So this should be an interesting matchup. I'm actually not sure how this one goes. So a 30 HP base gives you more time against Sabine. If Sarna can bring Chewie onto the field, he should be a huge blocker in the ground arena at least. Maybe there would be some saboteurs or some Spec Force soldiers to get around that gigantic sentinel in the ground arena. But honestly, unless there's some trick or something, I feel like Chewie deploying means that Klakier is going to be more or less confined to the space arena. However, it is not guaranteed that Chewie will get a chance to deploy. Sabine decks can be very fast, and if Sarna doesn't succeed in holding back his opponent's early aggression, he might well wind up losing this game before Sabine gets a chance, or before Chewie gets a chance to hit the field. So Sarna does get to go first and leads off with a Battlefield Marine, very solid starting play. So Klakier had better hope that he has a unit to go to space with. Battlefield Marine is a 2-cost 3/3 in the ground arena, and it looks like Klakier either does not have any turn 1 play or has something that is countered by the Battlefield Marine, and actually opts not to play it, just taking the initiative instead. That is definitely a start that I think Sarna likes to see, because as the Sabine player, you want to ideally be arena dodging. This is the concept of playing to the arena that your opponent is not in when you're going second, so that their unit cannot fight you. So sometimes when I'm playing Sabine, I will even try to mulligan for a hand where I have a 2-cost unit that I can play in both ground and space, so that I can do that dodging tactic. Red 3 hits the field, and a Consortium Star Viper arrives to oppose him. So if there were an ambush here, that would be an incredibly strong play for Sarna, but because he is not running the Energy Conversion Lab, he can't ambush in the Star Viper, rather just playing it with Chewie's ability to give it temporary Sentinel. Now, of course, Red 3 can trade with that Star Viper, but having a trade there is probably something that Sarna is overall fine with. It's an interesting scenario, though. If Red 3 goes for the base instead, because it only has 3 power thanks to Raid while it's attacking, the Consortium Star Viper can then attack clear Red 3 and still be alive with 1 HP. And it does look like that's what Klakier is going for. So he attacks into the base, doing 3 damage, but the Star Viper then takes out his unit and remains on the field. So now the space lane is kind of closed for Klakier, as further units will easily be picked off. Not a great start here for our Sabine player, but we'll see if he can turn things around. Sabine does get to deploy this turn, and he hasn't played any cards yet. But on the other hand, nor has his opponent. Sabine's ability being used for 1 damage to each base. Sarna goes ahead and plays another Consortium Star Viper. The restore on these units is going to be a big problem. If Sarna can get the initiative, having 2 of these space units with Restore 2 is really going to prevent Klakier from doing very much lasting damage here. And I think this is a very negative situation for Klakier. Even though Sarna didn't bring the energy conversion lab that would allow those Consortium Star Vipers to make more of an immediate impact, just having them on the field and having that Restore 2, which I think he's likely going to be able to get because he will probably have initiative at the end of this turn, could end up being pretty big. Okay, so Klakier uses his energy conversion lab to ambush the battlefield marine there with K2SO, defeating him and dealing 1 damage to base with Overwhelm. Sarna brings out R2D2 as a temporary sentinel. Sabine attacks into R2, dealing 2 damage to R2 and 1 damage to the base, and then we do see a metal ceremony to buff both K2 and Sabine. I have to wonder whether Klakier might have been better off just taking the initiative and not deploying Sabine at first, which I know is a crazy idea, but it would deny 4 restore to his opponent, and I don't think he has anything that is going to be removing those Consortium Star Vipers. So by taking the initiative instead of deploying Sabine, in a sense, he would have just inflicted 4 damage on his opponent's base. Ooh, Admiral Akbar arrives, dealing 2 damage to K2 and taking him out, even though he has that buff from the Metal Ceremony. It wasn't enough. Klakier chooses to deal 3 damage to Sarna's base with K2. Klakier then plays a. It looks like that Akbar was a temporary sentinel, but a Spec Force soldier counters it. One of the Star Vipers swings in for 3 damage to Klakier's base and 2 healing for Sarna's base critically. A fleet lieutenant sends Sabine in for, I believe that's going to be 6 total damage. So 2 base plus 2 from the fleet lieutenant, plus 1 from the experience, plus 1 from the on attack ability. However, 2 of that damage is then quickly healed by the Star Vipers. Klakier takes the initiative. Sarna brings out Mon Mothma, searching the top 5 cards for a rebel and putting it into hand. Ends up being a fleet lieutenant, which will allow for more of a counter punch. And one of the things that Sabine can do that Chewie can do that's really nice is play a fleet lieutenant using Chewie's ability. So you're playing that fleet lieutenant as a temporary sentinel and not only holding your opponent back a bit, but also getting that when played ability to buff one of your other units on the attack. Sarna is in a very favorable position in this game, but we'll see whether or not Klakier can put something together to get the win. Right now, those Star Vipers in space are a giant problem for Klakier. I really think that he would have been better off trading his Red 3 for the first Star Viper, rather than allowing the Star Viper to get the kill on the Red 3 there. Yes, you lose 3 damage to base, but you may end up making up for that in the future by the restores that the opponent will not be getting. There's already been 2 restore from that Star Viper. And additionally, having that unit off the field means that the field would be safer for Klakier to deploy space units of his own, or rather to play space units of his own. I said deploy erroneously. Rebel Assault being played there. Both Sabine and the Fleet Lieutenant swing into base. And they each get +1 attack while doing so. So that should be a considerable amount of damage. Fleet Lieutenant hitting for 4, and Sabine hitting for 5. So that's 9 damage to the base, and it also generates considerable tempo, which means that Klakier has a good chance of being able to get the initiative this turn, which will put him in a good position potentially for the next turn. Ooh, for a cause I believe in. Top 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's 4 for 4 on hitting heroic units with For a Cause I believe in. So that is going to be 4 damage to Sarna's base. Looks like previously 18 damage had been afflicted, so we're going up to 22 damage on the base, which means only 8 is left. This is getting interesting. The question now is which of these cards, if any, is Klakier going to keep? So the Gorilla Attack Pod is good for trying to push damage in the late game, but the problem is that it could be easily stopped by Chewie as a big sentinel. The Spec Force Soldier would potentially allow Klakier to get his units through a sentinel, but it might not have the chance to work out. And the U-Wing Reinforcement is a strong late game card for playing a bunch of units, but it's not necessarily what he needs. I mean, I think what he would really like to have seen was 2 more copies of For a Cause I Believe in for guaranteed damage. And of course, that's not going to be what Klakier has access to. So he has some tough decisions. And it looks like he's thinking over which of these cards, the 4th card, I forget what it was, but it has been discarded as unimportant. And he gets to either discard these cards or put them on top of his deck. The other thing, though, is that Sarna, of course, gets to see this, so is going to have some intelligence as to what is on the way. And it looks like Klakier, he almost discarded the attack pod, but now he's kind of balking at it. He's thinking and rethinking those options. Honestly, you might just want to discard all three of them and hope to draw another for a cause I believe in, or a K2, which are his direct damage options. That direct damage reach might be what he needs. Is he keeping all three of them? No, he discards the pod. He discards the pod, and it looks like he's putting the Spec Force Soldier and the U-Wing reinforcement on top of the deck, but now he's rethinking it again. He takes the pod back. All three of those to the top of the deck. Okay. And Sarna just grabs the initiative in that situation. That does mean that the restore on those Consortium Star Vipers is now online. Chewie could, I believe, deploy this turn. A little hard to tell with the way the players are stacking their resources. I personally like to stack my resources in sets of two. I think there's a 3 and a 4 there for Sarna, though, which does mean that it could be time for Chewie to hit the field. No, we're going to lead off with a takedown, getting Sabine off the field. But this does now mean that that fleet lieutenant can just swing for the base, but he's not going to. Oh, U-Wing reinforcement. Okay, so U-Wing reinforcement, looking at the top 10. The interesting thing about this is that if he finds a fleet lieutenant in this search, he'll be able to put it on the field to send his fleet lieutenant into the base for 5. Let's see what he finds. Looking at those top 10 cards of his deck, and he can play uh, up to 3 units and up to 7 resource. There's a fleet lieutenant. That's going to be one of them. So it can be 7 resources worth of units. Um, 7 resources worth of units, and you can have a maximum of 3. So it's going to be, if he can get a red 3, he could bring out the, oh, that is so spicy. Wing leader buffing the fleet lieutenant, then the fleet lieutenant to swing on in, and then another unit as well. And with that wing leader and the fleet lieutenant buffing it, it actually hits for 7. And Sarna is now left at 1 HP on his base. But he is going to be able to heal for 4 with his 2 copies of Consortium Star Viper. Oh, but he's not. He swings with the first one and heals for 2, and then Klakier takes the initiative, and that means the other heal is no longer online. This is an exciting game. Sarna trying to clean up the board. He does still have 1 point of healing from Admiral Akbar. So Sarna played a takedown this round and still has 3. Yeah, so Chewie could deploy this round. And I think that's almost certainly correct. If Klakier has a precision fire, though, that trooper could sneak past. Although all these units could attack the fleet lieutenant and clear him, it's an interesting scenario. If Sarna doesn't either get a sentinel on the field or kill that fleet lieutenant, Klakier can just attack into the base and win. So Sarna has to do something there. Ooh, make an opening, debuffing the fleet lieutenant by 2 and healing for 2. Then Akbar, all 3 of those units swing into the fleet lieutenant, defeating it. I do believe that Mon Mothma and R2 are defeated themselves, but Akbar is still on the field. I'm not sure if he attacked the base. No, okay, so he did attack and they just didn't put the damage on yet. And then, has Sarna forgotten that he can deploy Chewie? Am I miscounting the resources? He had 7 resources, but he didn't deploy Chewie. I'm really not sure why not. I think it would have been very favorable to do. Um, oh, maybe he's holding off on deploying Chewie to prevent Spec Force Soldier from countering it, but the problem is he's given his opponent free damage because now Spec Force Soldier can walk into the base. So I'm a little confused by that move from Sarna. I think it would have been better. I could be wrong, but I think it would have been better to deploy Chewie rather than not. Um, as he has sort of given his opponent free damage there with the Spec Force Soldier. Chewie now deploys for a cause I believe in with Sarna at 4 HP. 1, 2, 3, 4, game over. Klakier with the comeback win. What a crazy scenario. That Ewing reinforcement with both a wing leader and fleet lieutenant buffing the other fleet lieutenant for the win. I'm wondering if I miscounted the resources or what. I thought that Sarna could have deployed his Chewie, and that might have been the difference between winning and losing there. I'm actually not sure. Because it would have prevented that 2 damage from the Spec Force soldier, but I might have missed something, or it might have been a tactical decision that just didn't end up paying off. For instance, he might have been thinking that he wants to avoid deploying Chewie so that another Spec Force soldier from hand can't remove the Sentinel and then allow a guerrilla attack pod to come in. Not sure if that was what he was thinking, but that's one plausible thing. Now the players are sideboarding, and we're going to see whether our intrepid Chewie player Sarna is going to be able to hold back Sabine's aggression and win game 2 and take this match to game 3. As I mentioned in my earlier video from the top 16, this top 8 cut is single elimination. So if Klakier wins this match, he is through to the top 4, and Sarna is knocked out of the tournament. But if Sarna can win 2 games in a row here against Klakier's Sabine, he will proceed to the top 4 himself and knock his aggro opponent out instead. So players sideboarding here. It's a very interesting situation. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it will go in the end. Incidentally, I was saying earlier that I thought attacking the guerrilla attack pod might have been better, or I'm sorry, attacking the Consortium Star Viper might have been better than going for the base. I think Klakier ended up actually getting more value out of attacking the base, believe it or not. I don't know that it was the correct thing to do, but I believe that Consortium Star Viper only healed once, which means Klakier did 3 damage to the base, and 2 of it was healed because he didn't attack there. So overall, he did 1 damage to the base, and that might have been the 1 damage he needed to win. So you know what? He did win at the end with exact C's, as they say. And so maybe that was the right call after all. I'm not sure it was the right call in expectation, but it may have turned out to be good. Or maybe I miscounted and the Star Viper actually healed 4 and it was not a good call. Hard to say, but I think there was maybe 6 total healing, and that represented the 2 of the Star Vipers, or 1 Star Viper attacking twice and the other one once, because Klakier then took the initiative and prevented the second Star Viper from being able to heal again on that second to last turn. Sideboards are in, shuffling up. I'm personally kind of rooting for Sarna here. I know I'm a big fan of Sabine. I've played a fair amount of Sabine in the past. But I think Chewbacca is a leader that has not always been popular. I think, I remember in the pre-releases, for instance, the conventional wisdom there was that you should basically never run Chewbacca, because if you want to run Vigilance Heroism, you should just play Luke, who you can also play and who's normally considered better. But Chewie does have some tricks, and I think it'd be very cool if there actually is a strong Chewbacca deck that can cause people some problems here. So let's see. We'll see how Sarna does in game 2 of the match. But I am also, I'm also a Sabine fan. I do like some of those more straightforward plans. Sabine is Sabine is an interesting deck also, because while she is a aggro deck and, definitely one that's focused on a relatively simple game plan of just attacking the opponent's base, at the same time, Sabine is actually not the easiest deck in the world to pilot. Because the way that this game is structured lends itself to a lot of choices and opportunities, in terms of resourcing, in terms of decisions about initiative and tempo. Klakier with a disappointing initial hand. It looks like he has some larger units and some events. Shows his hand to his opponent and a quick mulligan decision there. Sarna presenting the deck, Klakier with the cut. For players who may not realize what's going on here, if you haven't been to some bigger tournaments, it's pretty customary in some of these larger events, and even actually on more local tournaments, for people to shuffle their deck and then offer it to their opponent. To cut the deck. And at some of the really bigger tournaments, opponents will actually shuffle their opponent's deck when it's presented, and that is kind of an anti-cheating mechanism. At least that's how it is in some other games. I don't know if shuffling your opponent's deck is going to be a thing here. That is a thing I believe in Magic the Gathering, but in some other games that I've played, it's definitely not been the custom. I think it gets people a little annoyed sometimes if the opponent is handling their cards too bluntly with the shuffles or whatever. But looks like Sarna's going to lead off with R2, making him a temporary sentinel, even though that doesn't do anything. But it's a nice habit to get into. And wow, Klakier misses his turn one play again. Not where you want to be with Sabine. I wonder what his ratios are. It's possible that he's just getting really unlucky, of course, but normally, I think that a lot of the Sabine decks that I have seen have more than 12 initial units. So the odds of getting at least something you can play on the first turn are pretty high. And some of mine have, like 15 like 15 or even 18 or maybe even more than that cards that you units that you can play on that first turn, um because you want to have more units than normal. If your plan is to mulligan to arena dodge, you want to have more units than normal to make that a safer strategy. And also playing multiple cheap units is sometimes a good strategy against control decks that have a lot of one for one aggro. So one for one aggro is like I spend my card to kill your card. So like an open fire, for instance, would be one for one aggro. Or I'm sorry, I said one for one aggro. What I meant was one for one removal. So open fire is one for one removal, takedown is one for one removal, vanquish is one for one removal. And one thing that you can do to kind of counteract that is play cards that are cheaper than the removal that your opponent is playing. So even though it's a card for a card, they end up down on the resource side of it. So as a silly example, if someone plays vanquish to kill your battlefield marine, they spent 5 resources to kill something that cost 2 resources, and you can probably do more stuff with your resources in the meantime. Now, to be fair, Vanquish isn't really a card that I think people are relying on against Sabine. Um, but Klakier has the initiative again. He's presented with a situation extremely like that in the first game. Let's see whether or not he opts to have red 3 go for the base, or if this time he's going to take the trade and eliminate his opponent's Consortium Star Viper with red 3. I personally am probably pro trade in this situation, which is kind of funny because I tend not to like that approach. Oh, very interesting. Klakier actually has a different option, activating ECL to ambush the Consortium Star Viper with a Green Squadron A-Wing from the hand, removing it from the field and leaving the more powerful Red 3 on the board and ready to attack. Okay. Sarna spending 4 resources. Are we going to see a takedown? No, it's going to be Bright Hope, a 2/6 Sentinel in space. He has the option to return R2-D2 to his hand, and if he does so, he actually gets to draw a card. But it looks like Sarna has not opted to use that ability. Klakier inflicts 1 damage to each base with Sabine's ability. Sarna sends R2 to attack Klakier's base, looks at his top card, and ends up deciding to put it on the bottom of the deck. So R2-D2, when played or on attack, may look at the top card of your deck, and you can either put it back on top or send it to the bottom, so it gives you a little filtering there. Sabine Wren now on the field, buffed by Red 3, so is able to deal 4 damage there. And Red 3 does swing into Bright Hope. Then we see a Metal Ceremony buffing both Sabine and Red 3. And it looks like Klakier didn't have any other way to spend his other 2 resources. That's a bit unfortunate for him. His situation would be much better here if he had been able to send out another unit, maybe a Battlefield Marine, Sabine Wren, or another small fighter. Any of those would have put him in a considerably better position just by having a further unit developed to be aggressive here. But despite having had some unfortunate plays and being considerably behind on using his resources, Klakier is still in a aggressive position against a slow leader, which is something that is not at all bad. Interesting scenario there. So Sarna plays a Fleet Lieutenant using Chewie's ability to give it Sentinel, and then swinging Bright Hope to trade with Red 3. So Klakier could now send his Sabine to defeat the Fleet Lieutenant, given that she's buffed by an experience token, and would also deal 1 damage to the base, but it's possible he can find a better play. A Fighters for Freedom hits the field. That is a 3/4 with Saboteur, and whenever you play an aggression card, deal 1 damage to the opponent's base. I'm actually not a big Fighters for Freedom fan, believe it or not. Sarna swings R2 into Sabine, inflicting 1 damage on her, just getting her that little bit closer to death, I suppose. Two resources for Sabine, small Sabine, inflicting one damage on the base thanks to the Fighters for Freedom. And now Big Sabine, or Leader Sabine, swings into the Fleet Lieutenant, defeating it, taking 3 damage and doing 1 damage to the base. And because of the experience from that medal ceremony, Sabine is left with 2 HP, not 1, which means that R2 cannot defeat Sabine on his own. He'll have to have some kind of buff to make that attack remove the opposing leader. We now look to be up to 6 resources. Klakier may or may not continue resourcing. Sometimes it depends on what cost curve you have, but sometimes these sort of Sabine decks are going to stop. Interestingly, it looks like he resources a Gorilla Attack Pod to go up to 6. I'm curious what's in his hand. I do think we saw a U-Wing reinforcement, but that isn't going to be something he can play until next turn. Admiral Akbar hits the field for 2 damage to Sabine. Nice play there, clearing the opponent's leader. Also providing a restore unit that could get some real value later on. Yeah, so Klakier indicates an attack to base with the Fighters for Freedom. Sarna points out that Akbar is a Sentinel, having been played with Chewie's ability, but Klakier points out that the Fighters for Freedom actually have Saboteur, and therefore can sneak past any opposing Sentinels. R2D2 swings in for 1 damage to Sabine Wren, Explosives Artist, lining up that lining up that make an opening that we see in hand to remove Sabine, I believe, for a cause I believe in, played by Klakier. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 damage and probably 4 discards. Those are not cards that you want to have at this point, I don't think. They're kind of smaller units, not things that he is necessarily going to want. He considers keeping the X-Wing on top, I think, to develop a threat in the space arena, which is currently empty, but ends up deciding to delete it. He is going to retain the Rebel Assault, though. I'm not sure that I'll end up getting big value for him, but it might. Um, he misses the opportunity to attack with Sabine here, though, and he is going to eat that. He is going to eat that make an opening, removing Sabine and healing 2 damage. If he had had Sabine attack into Akbar, she would have lived with 1 HP remaining and done 1 damage to the opponent's base. So it would have been a little bit of extra value generated by Klakier. Sarna ends up taking the initiative, and Klakier deploys a Echo-based defender. Now, we are going to go up to 7 resources here, and Chewbacca can deploy to oppose the Echo-based defender, I believe. Did both players go to 7? Akbar no longer has Sentinel, but the mighty Chewbacca can hit the field this turn. 4 resources. Takedown, clearing out the annoying Fighters for Freedom. 7 resources. I think we're gonna see it. I think it's gonna be the U-Wing reinforcement. Let's see if Klakier can get huge value off this U-Wing reinforcement again. If he can, if he can do another like Wing Leader plus Fleet Lieutenant or whatever, he could do a whopping 8 damage to the base in 1 attack from an Echo base defender while also buffing it up to be a big problem for his opponent. 6, 7 resources. 10 cards from the top of the deck. Let's see what he can get. There's the Fleet Lieutenant. He doesn't have a wing leader. So the best options here are probably Fleet Lieutenant plus K2 or Fleet Lieutenant plus 2 cheap units. Probably, I think did he have 2 A-Wings in there? Fleet Lieutenant plus 2 A-Wings is pretty nasty. That, like, not only does 6 damage immediately, but it opens up a major threat in the space arena where Sarna currently has nothing, and even once Chewie hits the field, he won't have it. Yeah, I think I would do Fleet Lieutenant plus 2 A-Wings. I think I want the 2 A-Wings more than I want K2 here. But that's not the option that Klakier selects. It's going to be Fleet Lieutenant plus K2. The problem with this is that I think that Chewbacca is just such an obstacle in the ground arena that I would really be wanting to pivot to the space arena. Admiral Akbar, boosted by a Fleet Lieutenant, trades with the Echo base defender. The Fleet Lieutenant with temporary Sentinel. Klakier can either use Sabine's ability here or take the initiative. Personally, I think it's
very likely that you'll see Chewie deploying. So using Sabine's ability probably does not concede the initiative. Yep, there's Chewie. And now Klakier can take the initiative. Sarna on only 12 HP, but Chewie is now a giant obstacle on the ground arena or in the ground arena. And I do think that if it had been those two A-Wings instead of K2, Klakier would be in a much happier position now. He could potentially play that Rebel Assault and immediately inflict 8 damage with the A-Wings, bringing Sarna down to a mere 4 HP. I do think that would have been a better option, but it wasn't what Klakier selected, and we're going to see. He could Rebel Assault the Fleet Lieutenant in K2 into Chewie, which would actually defeat Chewie, and then it would allow K2 to use his ability to deal 3 damage to the base. But I do think that spreading out to the space arena with Chewie about to hit the field would have been a better option. Assuming that he actually had 2 A-Wings, now I'm second guessing myself. Maybe that wasn't what we saw. I thought we saw there was like 2 A-Wings, a Battlefield Marine, 2 Fleet Lieutenants, K2, some other stuff. I don't really remember now, but if he did have the option for 2 A-Wings, I would have gone for the 2 A-Wings instead of K2 here. All right. Klakier does have the initiative. Let's see what he can do. One thing that would be really nice for him to have here would be a Spec Force soldier to remove Sentinel from Chewbacca. That would be extremely handy in this situation, allowing him to then potentially inflict the Rebel Assault for a whopping 9 damage, leaving Sarna at 3 HP, and meaning that if K2 were defeated, that would be the game. No, nothing too flashy. It looked like the Fleet Lieutenant was just going to walk into. Yeah, Fleet Lieutenant just walks into Chewie, hitting him for 3. That does mean that Chewie is now hitting for 5, and Chewie uses that to take out K2 in one hit. K2's ability used for 3 damage when defeated to the enemy base. Chewie takes 4 damage. Chewie now hitting very hard himself. 9 HP left for Sarna. And it is Klakier's move. Sarna inspecting Klakier's discard pile, maybe trying to see how many copies of For a Cause and K2 he's seen. Those cards are kind of the critical reach elements at this late stage in the game. That Chewie has 7 damage on him, which means he's actually swinging for 9 damage now. Kind of nasty. Klakier goes for a kind of stalling play using, he uses Sabine's ability, 1 damage to each base, and Sarna responds with a Ewing reinforcement of his own. Looking at his top 10 cards, 7 resources of units, and a maximum of 3 units on the field. Let's see what Sarna grabs. Sarna has selected his options. Let's see what they are. 7 resources. Ooh. Echo Base Defender R2 and a Consortium Star Viper. Not the best ever, but it does mean that he's, just putting out some solid units onto the field, and this board state is extremely unfavorable for Klakier, but he was in an unfavorable board last game and managed to make the comeback and win. Let's see if he can use his reach cards to get in there and win this one as well. Wow, that is not what you want. It is yeah, it is just a Steadfast Battalion with Sabine long defeated. The Steadfast Battalion is basically just a bad ETST in this situation, and Sarna takes the initiative. Chewie can also trade with the Steadfast Battalion on offense thanks to his grit. Um, but the game's not over yet. Let's see what happens here. Chewie indeed trades with the Steadfast Battalion thanks to grit. And the base is still covered by the Echo Base Defender that Ewing brought in, which means that the Fleet Lieutenant cannot attack into the base. Goes for the simple trade there, and then the Sarna's Consortium Star Viper lands 3 damage on Klakier's base and heals Sarna's base for 10 or for 2, bringing Sarna up to 10 HP remaining. Another copy of K2SO hits the field for Klakier, though. That's got to be something that he's happy to see. That's kind of a reach card with the guaranteed damage there, even if it gets cleared. Looks like an electro staff given to the fleet lieutenant, making him a 5/5, so he'll be able to attack into and defeat K2. Fighters for Freedom now take the field. Oh, Traitor is stealing the Fighters for Freedom. Klakier had better hope he has upgrade removal here. Sabine's ability used, 1 damage to each base. K2 defeated by the Fleet Lieutenant. If Klakier had a copy of Aggression in this scenario, he could get a huge result by playing it to defeat 2 upgrades and deal 4 damage. He could pick off the Star Viper, remove the Electro Staff, which would kill the Fleet Lieutenant, and remove the Traitorous, which would give him his Fighters for Freedom back. That would be a gigantic play. I don't know that he has Aggression. He would have to pay for it for 6 resources, which may not be what he wants to do. It is also a card that degrades your for a cause I believe in odds, so it might not be something in the build, but it would be incredibly strong here. He would not only get a 3 for, he would get I guess it's actually a 4 for 1, as he would essentially defeat 3 enemy units and get a unit for it, which would be very worth it at this phase, but I don't know if he's even running it. He does have some event, I think, in the hand as his most prominent card, but I just don't know what event it is. Wow. Alliance X-Wing, not the play you want to be making here. Not at all the play you want to be making here. I think we may see game over this turn with Klakier being defeated by Sarna here, as the Fleet Lieutenant can swing for 5, the Fighters for Freedom for another 3, so that's 8. Then we could go up to, yeah, we could go 12 damage just on the board, no buffs. And if Sabine's ability is used, it would actually be that would actually be lethal, although the Star Viper here being used to defeat Red 3. Klakier is way behind at this point. Takes initiative. 5 to base. 6 to base. I'm not sure there's any card that could save Klakier now. Ooh, and then a takedown for the X-Wing and Klakier concedes. Was that an aggression? He had a card in hand that kind of looked like an aggression. But if he did have an aggression, first off, it's kind of an odd card to include in a green Sabine, though it's very strong in red Sabine. And secondly, he did not play. If he did have it, he didn't play it at a time when it would have been great. So, giving him the benefit of the doubt, let's say he didn't have it and it was some other card, which, thanks to sleeve glare or whatever, merely looked like it might be an aggression. That seems perhaps more likely anyway. Well, Sarna was able to get the win, and we're going to round 3. Whoever wins this round will win the match, go to the top 4, and we'll perhaps see where things go from there. Perhaps Klakier will actually be able to draw a turn 1 play. He's missed it 2 games in a row, which is not where you want to be with a Sabine aggro deck. Let's see if maybe he's going to do better this time. Okay, he's got an A-Wing, I think. There's a starting play. Yep, there's the A-Wing. Klakier playing out his A-Wing. And Sarna with Mon Mothma, not really the card that you most want. Searching for a rebel is not really what you want to be doing here. Card advantage is not king in this game, despite what it may be in some other games. He does get a copy of Kanan Jarrus, who is a nice kind of mid-cost unit that also provides some restore, or rather some healing. It's not technically restore, with his on-attack ability. Klakier takes initiative rather than using Sabine's ability. This is a good play. Well, actually, it might not be in this situation because I don't actually think Sarna has any 3-cost removal. Um, so it might have been that he could have gotten away with that because Sarna doesn't have ECL for the Sarna doesn't have ECL for the Star Viper. So even if he had the Star Viper, it wouldn't allow him to even if he had the Star Viper, it wouldn't allow him to actually take out the A-Wing before it attacks, even if he had the initiative. Um, so Klakier played a Fleet Lieutenant to send the Green Squadron A-Wing in for 5 damage to base, and Sarna replied with a Fleet Lieutenant of his own, allowing Mon Mothma to trade with the opposing Fleet Lieutenant. So 5 damage to base, and Klakier has an uncontested unit in space, which is not where Sarna wants to be, but the Fleet Lieutenant does provide some cover on the ground. 3 for another Fleet Lieutenant, another 5 damage to base. This is going pretty well for Klakier so far. This is kind of what you want to be doing. Ooh, a Strike True, allowing that Fleet Lieutenant to deal 3 damage. Not the most commonly seen removal card, but quite useful here, picking off the A-Wing, and now the Fleet Lieutenant trades with the other Fleet Lieutenant, so we're back to an empty board. Klakier deploys Sabine, Sarna takes the initiative, and Sabine lands 3 damage to base. If we see a takedown for Sarna, he could remove Sabine before she gets the chance to make another attack. Klakier has landed some good damage, already having inflicted, looks like 13, 14 damage on the opponent's base. But Sarna has that mighty Chewbacca Sentinel to try and stabilize the ground arena later on in the game, and that could be a very important option for him. Takedown on Sabine. Empty board. Let's see what Klakier can play. Klakier really needs to come out strong with some units here to take advantage of his opponent having more or less no resources. You're really looking to play like 2 or maybe even 3 units here, ideally, and then maybe even going into a Rebel Assault on the next turn. A Green Squadron A-Wing and Sabine Wren doesn't look like he has a 1 cost, or if he does, maybe he decides to hold back a Spec Force soldier to use to counter one of the Sentinels that Sarna has access to. So with doesn't fully use his resources, but hey, Sarna didn't either. And having your opponent staring down a nice aggro unit in both ground and space is not a bad spot to be in. So I think Klakier would like to have one of those Rebel Assaults here, I think, as it would allow him to inflict 8 damage in one play, bringing Sarna dangerously close to a game over. Sarna, however, does have the initiative. Let's see what our bold Chewie player can do. Consortium Star Viper with Sentinel holding off the Green Squadron A-Wing. The A-Wing will have to attack into it, but Sabine gets to attack the base uncontested, landing 3 damage. Is that a wing leader in hand? Very interesting. Can't tell quite what card that is. Akbar arrives, inflicting 1 damage on Sabine. That is a wing leader in hand. I guess he can do wing leader, buff the Green Squadron A-Wing, clear the Star Viper while remaining alive. That's a pretty solid play. 1 damage to each base from Klakier's Sabine. He doesn't play the wing leader. Oh, you know what? He's going to go for the pod this turn. That's why. Pod. The guerrilla attack pod, sometimes known as Sabine's fire spray. Sarna had passed. A pod enters ready because Sarna has 15 damage or more on his base, and the pod swings in for another 4. We are going to hit the 7 resource mark where Chewbacca could take the field. I once again wonder whether Klakier is a bit too heavy on the ground with Chewie about to take the field. I think I might have I don't know what all was in his hand, but I think I might have preferred Wing Leader to buff the A-Wing and allow it to take down the Star Viper while remaining alive. That would then leave him with 2 threatening units in space, which a Chewie deployment doesn't do very much about. I think that Chewie has the ability to kind of lock down the ground arena, and it's possible that it's going to end up being very nasty for Klakier. Though Sarna is also low on health, and there's a good chance that Klakier can just close out the game with reach cards at this point. Like if he plays 2 for a cause, that could be game over. Sarna plays a Fleet Lieutenant as a Sentinel, and takes out Sabine, which prevents her from doing her one direct damage to base, which she could have done by attacking into Chewie. Okay. Klakier does have a U-wing reinforcement. He could play it and just be playing, are you a lucker here? With the goal being to have the dream combination of fleet lieutenant, wing leader, fleet lieutenant, wing leader, and spec force soldiers. The spec force soldier removes the sentinel on that fleet lieutenant. The wing leader buffs the pod, and the fleet lieutenant sends the pod in for an additional 2 damage. But he doesn't go for the big lucker play or the attempted play there. I think he's already played 2 fleet lieutenants this game, maybe even 3, so he must know the odds of that are not so good. Instead, going for the wing leader to buff his pod. The attack pod now as a 6/8 could easily handle the fleet lieutenant. Sarna deploys Chewie. One thing Klakier could do is attack with the pod into the fleet lieutenant. He would then take 3 damage, which would make him have 9 total power, which then means that Chewie would actually be defeated if Chewie fights the pod. So I actually think that could be pretty good. But it's possible he's trying to wait and then remove Sentinel from Chewie. Yeah, so one thing he could be doing is waiting for a Spec Force soldier. Why did he exhaust his other resources? He hasn't played anything this turn, has he? Maybe that's what he's about to play? I thought he had only played 3 resources for the Fleet Lieutenant, but it looks like he just exhausted 4 more. Did I miss something? What am I missing here? Was there a card that was played beforehand? I don't think there was. Did Klakier exhaust 4 resources for no reason? Initiative taken. Yeah, what did I miss? Very odd. Very odd. I'm not sure what I missed there. Did he play some card that I didn't see? Maybe he just didn't have another use for his resources. I'm not sure. It certainly looked like Klakier exhausted 7 resources this turn, but only played a 3-cost wing leader and nothing else, which would be very inefficient if so. I don't fully understand what happened there. Yeah, looking at his discard pile, there isn't another card that he used. Ouch, takedown on the pod. That's brutal. Klakier's probably got a U-wing here and just play as much to the space arena as possible, or maybe you do space arena plus K2 if you do draw a K2. Let's see what this U-wing reinforcement's going to get him. I'm personally not a huge fan of playing U-wing reinforcement in Sabine, just because I prefer to have my focus be on earlier stages of the game, and having a lot of small units rather than having more cards on the high end, where ideally the game's not even getting that far. Okay, so it looks like he's developing something of a Space Force. Red 3 hits the field. He can get an Alliance X-Wing, and he can back that up with a Battlefield Marine. So that's not bad at all. Yep. Red 3, Alliance X-Wing, and Battlefield Marine. Sarna just takes the initiative here. A Rebel Assault at this point could do a lot of damage, so a Rebel Assault with Red 3 and the Alliance X-Wing would inflict 8 damage, leaving Sarna at only 2 HP. And then the game could be closed out by K2 for a cause. Has Klakier used his ECL, by the way? It doesn't look like it. Ooh, Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight hits the field and wipes out the Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight hits the field and wipes out the red 3 there, limiting the damage that Klakier is going to be able to inflict. Two damage to Sarna's base from the Alliance X-Wing, but I'd really rather be hitting for more than that, especially because one of it is now healed by Akbar. Klakier is not doing damage very fast, and Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight has Restore 3, so this is actually a big problem for Klakier. Sarna's base still on 8 HP here. For a cause I believe in, that's a card that Klakier loves to see. 1 damage, 2 damage, 3 damage, 4 damage, full hit. He can keep K2 probably. Yeah, keep K2, discard everything else. K2 is guaranteed damage to the base, or more or less guaranteed. Technically, he could get like Force Lightning or whatever. But I think it's more or less guaranteed damage to the base. Sarna left at only 4 HP. Klakier probably doesn't have another for a cause, or he wouldn't discard anything. I think Sarna just takes initiative at this point. Klakier plays out another A-Wing. If he had a Spec Force Soldier, it would be game over. He could Spec Force Soldier Chewie and then walk his Battlefield Marine in for 3 and use Sabine's ability to close the game. Sabine's ability used here, but it doesn't win the game. It just inflicts some more damage. Sarna down to 3 HP, but if he attacks with Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, he does get Restore 3, which will bring him out of the immediate danger zone, perhaps. Klakier doesn't have anything else to do with his resources. A Spec Force Soldier there would have won the game, but he didn't have it. So what do you do? So as Sarna, what do you do? Do you just immediately attack with Luke and kill the Marine and heal your base for 3? I don't think he has anything that can kill 2 space units in one go, unless Sarna has a if Sarna has an out of aspect overwhelming barrage, he could play it here and wipe both the space units. But he doesn't have it, so it's going to be Luke taking out Klakier's Marine and healing for 3. If Klakier has a Rebel Assault, that could be that could be lethal, but he doesn't have it. It's just a swing. It's just a swing. The 3 damage that was restored by Luke goes right back on the base. 27 HP, or 27 damage. That means there's 3 HP left for Sarna. X-Wing attack plus Sabine closes the game. Does Sarna have an answer to that X-Wing? At the very least, he could play this Make an Opening that he has in hand. It wouldn't defeat the X-Wing, but it would debuff it so it can't do damage this turn, and it would heal the base a little bit more. This is a tense situation. Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Make an opening on the X-Wing, heals 2 damage. Sarna now at 5 HP, and the X-Wing is essentially a 0 attack unit this turn now, unless it gets buffed. Klakier going for Sabine's ability here, 1 damage to each base. 4 HP left for Sarna. This is looking like it's favoring Klakier, but we'll see what else Sarna can put together. 1 damage to base and 1 heal there with Akbar. Sarna now up to 5 HP. The base HP counters at the bottom of the screen are, I think, a little behind. Klakier, it looked like he was going to spend all his resources on something. What was he doing? 4, 5, 6. Maybe he's just counting the resources. 8 resources. So playing K2 would be pretty nice here. What is it? It's a U-wing reinforcement, and he erroneously exhausts 8 resources instead of 7. Not sure why. Maybe he figures that's his whole turn anyway, so it doesn't matter. He wants to just flood the board here, I think, especially in space. What he would really like is what he would really like is like K2 plus Red 3, or like Red 3 plus A-Wing or whatever, though I don't actually think he has that many A-Wings left. Um, Maybe he does. I don't know. I'm not. I haven't been keeping super careful track. K2. Yep, that's a good one. K2 and a wing leader to buff the X-Wing there. Now it can deal 2 damage yet again. Despite being debuffed, it's -2, but +2 from the experience. So if Sarna doesn't have another answer, that's going to be 2 more damage on the base this turn. Sarna is in trouble with K2 there as well for near guaranteed damage. Does he have a traitorous to grab the X-Wing? No. But he has Chewie swing into base there. If Klakier has a Rebel Assault, he should just take the initiative here and he wins the game. Because he can do a single Rebel Assault and then the X-Wing will hit for 5. And that's actually game on its own, plus any of the other space units to close things out. If he has Rebel Assault, he should just claim right here. I said claim like I'm a Destiny player. I believe an action similar to taking the initiative was called claiming the battlefield in Destiny, and if people say claim, it's often reflective of that background. Klakier does take the initiative. Sarna brings out a Battlefield Marine. Do we have the Rebel Assault from Klakier to close out this game immediately? Another card that would close the game immediately is a Heroic Sacrifice for that X-Wing. Another one would be a Fleet Lieutenant. Does he have any of the options that allow him that immediate win? Even if he doesn't, he can still do. No, he doesn't have it. It's a normal swing. Sarna left at 1 HP, but Luke Skywalker has yet to attack and is going to heal 3. Can Sarna out heal this? Yeah, Sarna swings into base. Only 7 HP left on Klakier's base. Sarna actually has lethal on the board, but it will take him 3 attacks right now. Three damage. Only 2 HP left. Akbar swings in, 1 damage to base and 1 heal, and the wing leader is there to close the game. Klakier gets the win. Oof, close one, but he prevailed. Okay, so our Sabine player ultimately able to get the win despite missing his turn 1 play in 2 out of 3 games there. And we see maybe some celebration there from Klakier. Well played to Sarna as well. He was really holding it off. Um, I do think that Klakier had perhaps a slight disadvantage in that he was I do think that Klakier had perhaps a slight disadvantage in that in a few of those games it felt like he was going too heavy on the ground arena before Chewie deployed and locked it down, and going to the space arena instead might have been to his advantage. I also think that in the first game, maybe I was miscounting the resources, but it seemed to me that Sarna could have deployed Chewie and waited to do so, and ultimately may have been defeated thanks to that, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, that's going to do it for this broadcast. So congratulations to Klakier for the win, and shout out to Sarna as well for a good showing with a much less popular leader. Chewbacca, I think, has not been incredibly highly rated, but Sarna took it to the top 8 of a big tournament. So shout out to Sarna as well. And unfortunately, this might be the last video that I make from Super Showdown Poznan. I know that it's anticlimactic to end with top 8 instead of doing top 4 and, of course, the finals, but the video that I've seen uploaded of this from the Sklad Gear site does not actually contain the final games, or does not actually contain the top 4 as I understand it. It's just footage of people kind of cleaning up. Um, and so I don't know if that footage is lost or if that footage is somewhere else that I have not seen. If anyone has the footage from the top 4 and from the semifinals and the finals of Super Showdown Poznan, please get in touch with me. I would quite enjoy commentating those as I have for the rest of the tournament, but it's possible those games are lost. In any case, this will either be the last video from this tournament, or maybe I'll have 2 or even 3, depending on if that footage turns up and if they filmed both semifinals. But in any case, this has been a lot of fun to commentate, and yeah, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks to you all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.